Describe the levels of corruption, including pay-to-play allegations in New Mexico, and what are you going to do to combat it?
It's at epidemic levels. And over the past 4 years, my opponent, even according to the Albuquerque Journal when they endorsed my campaign, said that my opponent refuses to take the blinders off and admit that there is a major corruption problem in the state of New Mexico. Everyone knows that. And the problem with it is that we don't have any accountability at the top down.
I think that it's not appropriate for the Attorney General to say something as broad-based as we have a culture of corruption. What they didn't say is what I went on to say, which is we do have corruption in New Mexico, in the Attorney General's office, in the case against Jerome Block, in the case against Rebecca Vigil Heron, in the case against Smiley Gallegos, in the case against Roberta Vigil, in the case against the police chief in Los Lunas, who we had removed from office, in the case of Carol Sloan, who we had removed from office. Those are important cases, but corruption is not a matter of whether everybody in the state is corrupt. I don't think that everybody in the state is corrupt. I think that we have corrupt officials in New Mexico, and we have focused our energies on finding that corruption and doing something about it.
There's nothing about this being a political football. This is an election, and we are running on the qualifications or the lack of qualifications. Removing someone from office like Carol Sloan, who hit someone with an object, is not successfully taking on corruption. Successfully taking on corruption is, for example, when you prosecute someone by the name of Lori Howard, who embezzled $143,000 from two communities that were struck and hit by a devastating tornado, indicting her, then convicting her, which we don't have in this era of the Attorney General's Office, a conviction, and then sending her to prison for 10 years. That restores faith in the public.
We started out by working with the Attorney General in Chihuahua. They're actually changing their justice system in Chihuahua under what they call the Rule of Law Project, from an inquisitorial-based system to an advocacy-based system. And our office has been training investigators and lawyers and the crime lab personnel in Mexico.
Long past time to secure our borders, and those that live in this area and these communities understand and know that. I'm the only candidate running for Attorney General that has shown that I have the ability to work with law enforcement officers to protect people, to secure the borders and talk about it. We know it's a federal issue. We know that we have to rely on the federal government to secure our borders, but we have to train our prosecutors before we start training prosecutors in the Republic of Mexico. We have to clean up our backyard before we start trying to clean up the backyard south of the border. I've prosecuted cases. I can tell you that we need to stop making New Mexico an attractive place for illegal immigrants. We need to have an Attorney General that is willing to, and I will, stand up and tell legislators in this very first session that we must repeal the law that allows illegal immigrants to obtain a driver's license in New Mexico. We must revoke those driver's licenses. I believe that because whether they're coming in from the Republic of Mexico or Poland or Brazil, it is causing a public safety issue, and my opponent disagrees. My opponent has been on record not once, twice, but 3 times saying that it makes New Mexico highways safer, that it reduces highway fatalities, that these people are driving because they passed the driver competency test, and that's important because they're going to be here anyways. My 15-year-old just passed the driver's competency test, and he can't drive with a foot. We need to make sure that that law is repealed. We need to make sure that people understand that you are not going to break a federal law and come to New Mexico and get a privilege.
You know, we're 2 weeks away from the election. It's really time to start talking about the facts in the election. And when my opponent says he's the only person who's running for this office that's worked with law enforcement, and I've already told you about what we're doing. We've trained 1,500 law enforcement officers in Mexico. We've trained 2,000 law enforcement officers in New Mexico to deal with issues like human trafficking, to deal with issues like money laundering. Our office has been working every single day with police agencies, and that's, you know, I'm going to commend my opponent for working with the police unions and getting endorsements from the police unions. But it doesn't tell you about the boots on the ground, the training that's going on. There are a lot of law enforcement officers that are supporting me, and we'll find out in the election about that. With regard to driver's licenses, I have indeed pointed out that it is the job of the New Mexico Attorney General to support the laws that are passed by the legislature, and I don't think that you can pick and choose which laws you're going to support and which laws you can't, and that's essentially what he's saying with regard to the driver's licenses. I think that that's a wrong point for an Attorney General to take.